Denis Villeneuve's secret to Dune success, both Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2. And if you remember, Dune Part 1 actually had everything going against it when it came to success because it was coming out on Max during COVID. And so it didn't really have a strong theatrical run, but it did really well. People really liked it. It earned money. And so it got a sequel. So Denis Villeneuve did an interview where he's talking a little bit about how he got to the point where he could do Dune.
There's all these stories of how long you've been dreaming of making Dune and reading the books as a teenager. But it strikes me that it was a project that you needed time to make.
Absolutely. I needed to get some muscles as a filmmaker in order to be able to bring that home. I was always cautious not to put myself in a zone where I will not be strong enough, not to skip the steps. Through the years, many times I declined offers because I was feeling I wasn't ready.
That's a super common feeling in my opinion, because most filmmakers, they get really ambitious. I know myself, I've been really ambitious. There's even been films I did a 52-minute short film. I don't think it's labeled as a feature at quite that length. You get to the end of that project and you're like, hey, this is there's a lot of issues with this. And I think there's levels to Denis Villeneuve's thought process when it came to creation, that he wanted to feel confident in his filmmaking ability.
I want to jump in and talk about one film, one of my favorites, S.D.N.Y.
Yeah, S.D.N.Y is a very important project in my career. It's an adaptation of a play written by S.D.N.Y, a Lebanese author that was born in Beirut, and then because of the war, his family moved to Montreal. The play itself is a masterpiece about this crazy journey of two twins at the death of their mother will have to go back in the country of their origin and to find out the truth about their origins. That story that was set in the Middle East strangely had strong resonance with me. I felt very intimately linked. Despite the fact that it was happening at the other end of the world, there was something that it was saying that was deeply meaningful to me. And I remember coming out of the play, and my wife at the time said to me, "Oh my God, you're going to do a movie again." Because I saw the play at a period of time where I had decided to stop making film for a while. I wanted to learn my craft. I wanted to know more about how to direct actors, how to write. And I was through that process of learning because I was not satisfied with my two first features. And I wanted to make sure that the next time I will take a camera in my hands, I will finally be happy with the results.
I think a lot of times as indie filmmakers or as people with creative vision or people who want to work towards something, we're kind of in a rush, you know? I heard on a video this week, it was equating to weight loss. They were saying hey, people tend to not lose weight because they're trying to do it too fast. And he's like, what are you in a rush for? I think that principle applies to filmmaking as well, and even creative projects. When you're learning a craft, even if you feel like you've been doing it for a decade, or you feel like you've been doing it for a decade and a half, or maybe you're just starting, becoming proficient, becoming really good, becoming a top performer at anything takes a long time, and it takes a lot of messing up. And I think there's a lot of wisdom here that Denis Villeneuve is saying, is because he was so cautious about biting off more than he could chew. He was so cautious about getting something that he wasn't ready for. So he took a long time. He said he took a break from filmmaking for a while because he was like, I want to learn the craft. I want to spend time learning the craft before I just continue pumping out films, because he did 2 features and he wasn't happy with the end result.
S.D.N.Y was the first movie I've made where I felt home because as a filmmaker. Prior to that, I was feeling that I was like a film student that was influenced by many masters before me, and I was referring to or having always the images from others in my mind as I was shooting. And S.D.N.Y was the first movie where I felt sovereign making images only in relationship with the reality in front of me, not having all those ghosts inside my head. So it's the first movie that I really feel that I feel it was mine. It was these images were mine.
That's a really interesting concept. He's talking about how he felt like a film student. He felt like he had all of these ghosts in his head helping him almost make a very specific type of movie, but he never really felt like the images. He didn't feel like his two features before this one actually were his. And he said that there's something unique about this film because he felt like this is the first time it was actually his. I wonder how many filmmakers have reached that point. Like, how many projects have you done, whether it's a story, whether it's a documentary, whether it's even in commercial work, when you create the project, when you are directing it, when you're filming it, when you're editing it, how much of it feels like it was yours and not just like a remix version of what someone has talked to you about in the past, or how much of it is a remake of what a film professor at a university talked to you or showed you, or maybe even analyzing, all of the great filmmakers and trying to emulate them to help yourself get better. How much of your project feels unique to you? I'm curious. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a project or of any kind that you filmed and you were like, oh, this was the moment where I really felt like this was mine.
5 years to adapt that. Right?
Yes, it was a long process. I took my time because it was not an easy one. I think that I've learned most of what I know about screenwriting today working on that project. The structure, about the development of a character, about everything I've learned from S.D.N.Y helped me to work on Dune. Most importantly also is that as I was doing S.D.N.Y has been shot in Jordan.
Yeah.
And as I was shooting S.D.N.Y, I needed to find very specific locations. And it was a very intense scout that took over, spent weeks of work. And I remember seeing landscape that I was saying to myself, this will not fit in S.D.N.Y. It is not for S.D.N.Y. It's for something else. It is for that sci-fi movie that I'm dreaming to do one day in the future, maybe. That I said to myself, if ever I do a movie like Dune, I have to come back here. And so it's like building blocks like that, but there's a bit of S.D.N.Y in Dune.
Again, he took 5 years to make this one movie. So not only did he take a period of time off, like probably years after his first two features before he made this project that he felt like is truly his. And in some ways, probably for him, I'm picking up the vibe that he felt like he became a filmmaker, like a real artistic vision storyteller filmmaker when he did this film, but he actually took 5 years to make this movie. A big chunk of that was probably the script writing and making sure it was like fine-tuned with characterization. And then it probably took a bit to film, maybe either a few months or maybe even a whole year. And then even spending time with the edit, right? Plenty of time with the edit. I think there's lessons to this. Again, this is part of the process that built him into being able to create movies like Dune Part 1 and 2, is because he took his time. He was honest with himself. He said, I need to take a break to learn my craft. I need to make a film. I must make this film because there's something inside of me that's saying, hey, you have to make this film. But I'm going to take my time with it because there's so much about it I need to learn. Again, what are you in a rush for? I think with the culture of content creation, especially for filmmakers on YouTube or on social media, the high level of output that's required to get attention kind of trains filmmakers' brains to be like, okay, so I need to do like one film a year for the next 50 years. So I have 50 films. And only then will I be able to become like an established filmmaker if I have that level of output. And that's not really true. I think on some level, it's really about how good of a product are you putting out, because filmmaking is not YouTube content. I personally say that filmmakers should be on YouTube, but they need to create content for YouTube that is a low barrier to entry. That's a low barrier to work so that you can have high output. But the level of seriousness you put into a film is very different than the level of seriousness you put into a YouTube video. Now, there are people who put out really high quality, very in-depth, very thoughtful storytelling YouTube videos, But on some level, unless you're really good at marketing, the majority of people that do that are just not going to have very large returns. And so I would say for filmmaking, don't compromise. Take time. You're not in a rush. Quentin Tarantino is one of the most popular filmmakers in history. And how many films has he done? He's done 9. He's talked about only doing 10 films. Take your time with it. Take your time. You could do 2 films in a decade. You don't have to put out a crazy high number of films just to become established, just to become a master, just to get to the point of filmmaking dreams that you have. But at the same time, learn marketing, learn the behavior, the viewing behavior of audiences by being on places like social media, specifically long form content like YouTube. I think that's the most valuable for filmmakers. And then you'll probably see growth for real potential success in your filmmaking career.
How can we evolve and not repeat the same mistakes that we are doing over and over again? And to a certain degree, with Hosseinzadeh too, that was about the family breaking these cycles. There seems to be thematically something.
It's something that is, I'm obsessed by, this idea of breaking the cycles, compulsions, the obsessions that are coming from our genetics or our education, or how can we evolve? How can we stop making over and over and over again the same mistakes as a species? It's something that I'm obsessed by, and that is, I think, sadly relevant today.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I start to get offers about screenplays. But there's one that kept popping in the back that stayed in my mind for what it was saying about the cycle of violence and power of faith, and it was Prisoners. And meanwhile, I was developing on the other side a project with a friend of mine who called Enemy, an adaptation of José Saramago, The Other Like Me, a tiny project, and both were greenlit in the same time. We made a case to the studio in Hollywood to ask them to wait, because I was feeling that it would be clever to do a smaller film in English, my first English movie, with a small crew in Canada, something that will be much more experimental. And in the back of my mind, the idea was, I was frankly afraid to go to work in Hollywood. I was fascinated, I was excited, but afraid at the same time. I was afraid to be crushed. I was afraid to lose my identity as a filmmaker. I had heard so many stories, and I was not considering myself better than the others. I'm saying, if it happened to this guy or this guy, why it will not happen to me? You know?
Enemy becomes your identity in your back pocket.
Exactly.
If Prisoners makes you something you're not.
Exactly. If ever it all goes down the drain and I'm crushed and I'm kicked out of Hollywood, they say, what the fuck is that movie? They could also say, oh, Villeneuve is there. And that
he made the strange one of the kids too.
There was that back of my mind that I will have an anchor, like someone who's doing a rock climbing, and I had something solid somewhere, that an anchor that will help me not to fall down the cliff.
That's actually super valuable. It's again another example of him choosing to slow down progress. So he had Prisoners and Enemy, both were greenlit, but he knew Enemy was a more small, doable project. He hadn't done a film in English yet, and so he was like, hey, let me do Enemy. Let's wait on Prisoners, even though probably it seems like in his mind, he had this ambition. The cycle of violence is what he said. It's something he cares about, telling stories that what happens in the cycle of violence. There's a common thread through a lot of his movies about the cycle of violence. However, he was thinking about Prisoners, but he was developing with a friend Enemy, and he thought, this is a better film to anchor myself in, because if I come out and do Prisoners and it's not landing, I haven't done a movie in English yet. Like there is some disconnecting points here. He literally requested the studios to slow down and let me do Enemy first. Let me do the project that I feel is more doable and less high stakes. It's so fascinating to see someone who's as honest with themselves to say, I'm not ready. We have so many people in culture and social media and production and influencing that is like, hey, fake it till you make it. Keep going. Like, just be the best you. Don't say no to opportunities and grind, right? And it's like, those are all true. But like, if you start to get an inflated ego and you start taking on projects that deep down your gut is saying you're not ready for, like, do you have the amount of humility to just be like, hey, I'm not going to waste all this money on something I don't feel confident that I can deliver a very valuable product in. He probably could have delivered Prisoners in a very strong way when he was first greenlit for the film. He chose to say, hey, I still am not sure. I'm going to play it safe. As he said, he wanted an anchor in the Hollywood system to hold on to before he tried to, jump up and grab like the more ambitious, handhold when scaling the mountain of career success, especially with high stakes in Hollywood. High stakes because there's so much money being put into these projects. This is example number 3 of him slowing down and saying, I am not fully confident as I feel I should be.
When people were asking me, specifically in Los Angeles, what will be your dream project? The only thing that popped out in my mind that was always Dune. In the Arrival, it was the first time that I was working with VFX on that scale, to learn how to instruct and give guidance to animators to go exactly in the direction I wanted, how those creatures will behave. There was this idea also trying to stay in a very close, intimate relationship with sci-fi, and that the big spectacle will always in some ways stay in the background. Because at the end of the day, when you look at Dune, it's not the sci-fi element, the technology is really in the background, and that's something I'm not focusing on. It was seen from the human's point of view, very grounded.
It feels like with Dune, you were really able to direct that in a way where your focus was on exactly what it needed to be. It could be as intimate as it was.
It's a project that I would never dare to approach without having learned my craft. And through the years, in different ways, I learned different things that helped me to let's say, attack this adaptation.
So if you have ambitions to create a film or create a story that's as ambitious as Dune, Denis Villeneuve has created for the world, I would say there is a very clear formula here. And the main formula is project after project after project. Do not rush yourself. Slow down, right? On some level, there's an element of fear. It could be humility, but I think there's just an element of following your gut, and there might be a little bit of fear involved. Fear shouldn't paralyze you. Fear should move you forward. So what did he do every time he felt like he needed to tell a story or felt like he got an opportunity to tell a story? In the early days, he would say, I can tell the story. It's greenlit. I have the opportunity. I don't feel like I'm ready. Did he just not do it? No. He leaned in and he said, let me take time with this project. Let me do the work, right? When he got greenlit for Prisoners, he didn't say, all right, I don't think I'm ready for Prisoners, so I'm just not going to do it. I'm just going to sell the script and earn some money, right? No, he said, let me wait, like give me a second for Prisoners and let me create this other film to be my first English film, right? He didn't let fear paralyze him, but he used it as a cautious motivator to do everything correctly, to make sure he's learning, to make sure that he's fleshing out to the best of his ability the craft of filmmaking on every level, working with the visuals, working with the audio, working with the editing, working with the actors, working with the story. Like a director has to do so many parts of a film. And a big part of it, if you have a crew to work with, is just communication. Like the director is the person who's he's not the person setting up the camera and always and like changing the settings in the camera and all that. Like if you have a crew of people, you have to just communicate what you want. And you have to be good at communication. You have to be patient and always casting vision. And so in order to do that, you have to be very understanding of all of the parts of filmmaking and have a very clear grasp. You don't have to be an expert in every aspect of filmmaking, but you have to have a very clear grasp and a realistic grasp about what each step, what each part of filmmaking entails. So if you were to learn something from Denis Villeneuve, who's created like the most amazing sci-fi epic I think we've seen in the past decade, and he's done 2 of them, and he's saying he's going to do a 3rd. It is follow your gut. If there's a little bit of fear there, Don't let that fear paralyze you, but rather get to work. Do things that you believe are within reason for you to accomplish and take your time with it. Do not rush the process. And eventually, you can get to the point where you are creating movies like Dune. I don't know if he ever saw himself being able to create a film like this. I seriously doubt that he did on that scale, but he ended up doing it. Like, he actually did it. And the reason why is because he made sure along the way he wasn't rushing himself. I hope this is super valuable. If you really love Dune, let me know in the comments what you love about Dune, what inspired you about the movie Dune, and if you're a fan of Denis Villeneuve, let me know what your favorite movie he's done is in the comments. Thank you for subscribing to the channel and liking this video. I'll see you next time.